So we're going to talk today about the art of overthinking. And so I just have to tell you guys, we just have to own who we are and we have to be able to pat ourselves on the back. And I am the GOAT, the greatest of all time in overthinking. Me. I have the EGOT, the Emmy, the Grammy, the Oscar, and the Tony for the screenplay and the lyrics for overthinking. That's me. I own that, right? So all of y'all have to try to figure out how to get where I am in overthinking. And here's the thing. When you are an overthinker, it causes challenges in movement. It causes challenges to confidence and faith and knowing and believing and doing all of that kind of stuff, because you end up being in this paralysis, right? There's got to be something that you miss. There's got to be one more thing to think. And you forget when you're an overthinker sometimes to sit in the fact that you have a choice, including about overthinking. You forget about being still. You forget about listening and paying attention to what's around you. You forget about being aware and evaluating what's true, right? What real, actual experience, actual facts versus the story you're telling yourself about what's going on. You forget that when you're in overthinking mode. And so it causes you to be in a space where it's going to be a challenge to achieve the things you want to achieve the things you want to achieve, or be where you want to be, or do what you want to do, because you are in overthinking mode. Now, that's not to say that planning isn't important. Proper prior planning prevents poor performance, right? Planning is important. Having a strategy is important. At least knowing the ultimate goal is important, right? But there's a point where if you keep thinking and keep thinking and keep thinking and never move, what's the point? What's the point? So you guys are going to hear from an amazing person this week on the podcast. I interviewed Jacqueline Wales this week, and she is an expert in fearlessness, right? And understanding fear and human behavior around fear, and has just some really amazing nuggets to share with you guys. There is something crazy on my shoe. Some wonderful things to share with you guys about that whole area of fear. And as we were talking and recording this podcast, and I was listening to it again to be able to post it and get it ready for this week, there were a number of things that came up, and that whole idea of owning your own authority, of being in a space where you are really clear on where you want to be, and then owning that and stepping into that. And you guys who've been following me and listening to me long enough know that whole idea of manifesting, and that whole idea of calling things into being, and all of that kind of stuff. And I am absolutely a woman of faith. I believe that there's a plan. I believe that there is something higher than me. I believe that there is a divine calling, and I know that I am moving into this purpose. This whole idea of surrender has been very difficult. And part of what is lovely for me as an overthinker, and as someone who's going to show up just as me, right, and speak the truth on this show and podcast when I'm working with clients, is the beauty of being able to do what I do. Is I don't have to overthink other people's stuff, right? So it actually enables me to get out of my own way to be able to show up in my genius zone for other people. Because it's so much easier to do stuff for other folks than to deal with our own, right? And to do our own. Although when you do the work, and I've spent a lot of years doing the hard work on my own awareness, on my own understanding of overthinking, and understanding how I show up and when I show up and whether I show up, that ability to use that in a way that is of service also gives you a pause and a stillness around your own messy mind to get back to the stuff that is really important, and to be able to focus on the things that really make some sense. And so when I look at moving forward and how things are moving, got a word this morning. It was a crazy weekend, right? So great things have been happening. It is after that retreat that I talked to you about, it just really, really amazing things just personally, professionally, all that kind of stuff is just moving in the right direction. And then I had a weekend where it just kind of fell off the cliff, right? Is this where I'm supposed to be? Does this make sense? My friend Joy, who is amazing, she is a columnist for the Houston Chronicle. She's doing some crazy, crazy, crazy stuff, y'all. You got to follow her and read her articles. And she just did an article this week on these bookstores and Project Row houses, a comic book store and a bookstore in Project Row houses. And so I was having this kind of falling off the cliff thing, right? Like, does this make sense? What's going on? Just feeling discombobulated. And then read Joe's article about these folks doing a bookstore, and just, I mean, the falling off took an actual dive. And I had to make myself stop overthinking, because then I'm like, that whole dorsal, right? The whole polyvagal theory, right? Trying to push myself out of this paralysis and trying to just will myself into ventral, right? Will myself into joy. And it doesn't work that way. And so I kept sitting and I thought, okay, let me just pause. What is going on? And here's something I realized. And so my family knows this, and some really close friends of mine know it, but I have not talked about this in decades. In decades, I haven't talked about this. So I'm reading this article, and I love bookstores. I love books. I got a book issue. I buy lots of books. I don't always read the books I buy, but I buy lots of books. I eventually read them, but it takes me a minute. And so I'm listening or reading about this bookstore. And what hit me is that it struck my gut, like it was a gut punch. Why? Because when I first started thinking about entrepreneurship, and I didn't put that word to it. I didn't put that word to it at all. I just knew there was something I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was open a bookstore. I have the logo. I have the name. I was going to go buy, this was when I was still living in Houston before I moved to Ohio. I was going to buy there was an old restaurant called the Pig and Whistle. It was on the corner of Greenbrier and Richmond. And I had a whole thing planned out about why I was going to use a restaurant that was like a house as opposed to just a storefront. I mean, all of this kind of stuff. And so when I was reading this article, what started happening was the overthinking. I can't believe you didn't do that. Because when you wanted to do a bookstore, that's when all the electronic books took over and all the independent bookstores started going out of business, and there was so much pressure. And so you didn't do it. And that led to, well, but when you bought your first house and then you moved and you had to sell it, you lost money on your first house. And then when you got ready to buy your condo and you got ready to sell it, it was in the middle of the recession. So you lost money there. And now, you're in this house and you love your house, but you're getting all these offers because the market's really hot. But if you buy now, you can buy. I mean, you hear what I'm saying? Okay. Queen, the goat of overthinking. And here's what happens. That death spiral starts because those experiences are true. I did lose money on my first house. I lost a lot of money selling that condo, right? Who knows what's going to happen with the market now? Because see, I'm already down the bridge, across the road, in the next county before I even know what's going to happen. Because, planner. So all of those experiences that I had are absolutely true, right? Electronic books did start taking over. Independent bookstores had a really, really difficult time at that time. There were a lot of them closing. Even, so Barnes & Noble is here. What was the other one? What was the other one that started with a B that was around the time of Barnes & Noble? I can't even remember. But that one's gone. Walden Books is gone. All these bookstores are gone. But there was another one that started with a B. That's almost it. So all of these things started happening, and all of that is factual. What's not factual is necessarily the story that my brain and my spirit started weaving about, you haven't done anything. You should have done it. You missed the opportunity. The window is closed. Every time you do something, it doesn't work. That mess. And I'm calling it mess because it's head trash. That's what it is. It's mess. Because then I started connecting it to when I started this business. I felt like I needed to have a product. Yes, I'm selling, my services and my genius and all this stuff I do well, but I need something tangible. I need a product. Why? Because everybody else has one. Mm-hmm. Why? But that was something that was sticking in my craw. And so I developed one. I got this online thing, this online portal, and I hate it. I hated doing it. I hated building it. I hated talking. I hated it all. But I did it because there was something saying, well, you got to do it because that's what they say. That's what they say you need to do. You got to have a product. But the overthinking is what gets us into this nightmare of, wait a minute, can I just pause and sit in the moment? This word that Jerry sent me this morning about pausing and looking back. See, physician, heal thyself. She was speaking to me the stuff that I've been speaking to myself. But see, I can't hear it when I'm saying it to me. Pause, right? Celebrate. Look how far you've come. Even though it seems like it took forever, it's been a minute. It's been but a minute, right? It's but a grain of sand. It's been but a minute. And look how far you've come. Look how much you've done. Look at all of these kind of things, celebrating the successes and the movements. But that overthinking will prevent you from looking at how far you've come versus what you've missed, or where you're not, where you are versus where you want to be, where you thought you should have been, as Holly said, shitting on ourselves. I should have been, as opposed to stepping back and pausing and saying, but look at all the things when I finally did, in those moments when I did just pause and surrender, look at what happened. Look at what the universe brought. Laurel, remember who you are and whose you are. I wear a ring that says faith, love, and hope. Every day I wear this ring. And the word that is towards me is faith, to remember, right? And then Jerry sent me that word this morning, just remember, right? Tears. Then I looked at the message for today on my Bible app, and it was Ephesians 4. That one happened to be Ephesians 4:4. But I went back and read Ephesians, and Ephesians 1, you are worthy of your calling. You are worthy of your calling. God wink. Okay? Stop overthinking. Now, I'm not talking about analyzing. I'm not talking about understanding the risk. I'm not talking about failing to at least understand what you're doing, right? Sometimes you got to be quick and approximate, but there are times when you need to be a little bit more slow and precise, right? Don't do just absolute craziness, but give yourself the opportunity to get those divine downloads, whatever divine is for you, to get those little God winks, to get those little signs from the universe that say, yep, this is where you're supposed to be, or this is what you're supposed to be doing. You know, when our mastermind coach gave us this, there was a piece of paper and she said, here's a picture of a blank check. I want you to write a check to yourself. Put in the number that you think. Write a check to yourself. This is the check that you're going to be cashing at the end of 2022. And so there was a number that I first thought, right? But then there was another number that kept coming into my mind. Like it was so, I could see it. I could visualize the number. This number is so crazy. It's so crazy. But I put it down. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't know what's going to happen. But I put it down. Right. And what she said was, we often get caught up in the how. She's not the first person who said that to me. Right. We often get caught up in the how. And we forget that we need to be focused on the what. The how will take care of itself. We need to get focused on the what. And this is why that is so difficult for many of us, especially those of us who have been in corporate. And in particular, if you've been in HR, I talked about this a little bit last week, is we've been taught that the how becomes really important. It actually begins to overshadow the what, right? As you begin to move up through your career, as you begin to build a business and move from working in your business to working on your business, you begin to move from a solopreneur, right, to maybe an entrepreneur that has a team and all of this kind of stuff. You begin to pull up. How we get things done actually becomes really important in those leadership roles, right? In those more senior executive roles. How we engage with people, how we talk to people. Are our actions aligned with what we say, right? How are we acting? How do we show up? That becomes really important. And when you're looking at performance of people, when you're looking at how leaders engage, who you're looking to be the next people that are setting the vision and the mission and rallying the troops to get somewhere, we start talking about how the tables turn, right? Because that technical expertise is fantastic, and it may have gotten you recognized, and it gave you a level of information in your toolbox, right? But that technical expertise isn't what makes you the best leader, because somebody else is going to be responsible for doing the technical stuff. It's about how you rally other people, how you engage, how you coach, how you train, how you encourage, how you manage performance. The how becomes really, really important, even more so at some levels than the what. And so even focusing on results and how you focus on results becomes really important. So if you start thinking about this movement to entrepreneurship or movement into leadership outside of a corporate arena or an organization arena, if you're talking about just anything in your life, the goals that you have, knowing what that goal is, but being so focused on how you're getting there sometimes can completely eliminate your ability to get there. Mm-hmm. Because we get so focused on the how, we get so caught up in that path that we're not able to be flexible along the journey. We see everything that's not the exact path that we plan as a derailer, as opposed to maybe just a little bump in the road or a rejection that is protecting us from something that was a problem, right? It's an opportunity to learn or grow or move or change. But if we are so focused on, here's where we're going, so we got that, but now we're going to focus on how we're going to get there, right? What's the path? What car are we taking? What thing are we learning? What all the how stuff enables us to lose focus on where we're going. We get so caught up in the next step that we lose the big picture. And yes, you got to have a balance, right? So those people who are only big picture, it's like, that sounds real good, but how are you going to make that happen? Right? And those folks who are so focused on every little step, but where are you going, baby? Where are you going? Because you're taking all these little bitty steps, but is it getting you where you want to be? Because see, you haven't looked up in about 4 years. So it's that overthinking. How do we balance the overthinking to remember, one, that we are enough and we have what we need always, right? That we don't get caught up in so much prep that we're never ready. Because you're never going to be 100% ready. Ever, ever, never, ever, ever, ever. There's always going to be something else or someone else to know. Always. But if you get caught up in that, you get stagnant. And that's where, as the guest I have this week on the podcast talks about that fear. Are you letting that fear become a barricade for you? Or is it a driver to get to the next thing? Holly said, tell me no, watch me go, right? That was her deal. Every time somebody told her no, she's like, watch. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, I'm not quite there. I don't have that kind of, right? And even sometimes people say, or you hear a lot of people saying, stop talking to people, just do it. Let your actions speak. Stop giving people explanations. Stop, talking about what you're going to do and why and trying to get people on board and all. Just do. Sometimes silence is the best answer. Sometimes silence is the best answer. And when we're overthinking, if you're an overthinker and you're an external processor, right, you think out loud, that can really get you in a situation where people start listening to you. They're taking you at your word. If you got people who move really quickly, you're having a conversation. You're just thinking out loud. They're listening to you and getting direction and moving. And you were just thinking. And then the next time when they've started moving and they're doing something, you're like, wait, what are you doing? Look, well, you said, and you did say, but that wasn't what you meant. What you meant was, hey, let's just talk about it. Let's just get some stuff out there, right? But if you're not paying attention to how you're overthinking and when you're overthinking and be able to figure out how to short circuit the overthink, you wind up in that tailspin and in a difficult position of getting to the goal that you say you're trying to achieve, whether that's for you or for your team or for your business or personally or professionally or whatever. Overthinking becomes a challenge. But if you will give yourself the opportunity to just stop a minute, just stop a minute. And whatever it takes you to do that. When I was first starting with my therapist years ago, and I'd get in that, I call it the death spiral, that death spiral. Sometimes it was death spiral of despair, right? Like I was talking to you about this weekend. Oh my God, I didn't, and I couldn't, and I should have, and all that just mess. That death spiral, I actually, in order to short circuit it, I would physically put my hands up and say, stop. I had to have a physical reaction, a physical movement to short circuit my brain, right? To stop that movement. So what is it that you can find? One, to be aware and to trigger, I'm overthinking. My mind is messy. I'm overthinking. I need to stop it. So what can you do to be aware? What are the things that trigger your awareness? And then when you are aware, what is that step you can take to short circuit whatever that thing is you now become aware of, right? Because it's great to know, but then what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? And if you can figure out a way to move the short circuit to action, you can redirect yourself to the goal that you're trying to achieve. Because the redirection is where the success is. And I love redirection as opposed to pivot, right? The redirection is where the success is. The redirection is where the genius is. The redirection is where the energy begins to flow. And you can only get to that redirection if you've been really aware and you give yourself the grace and the space to redirect. Because often when we're in that overthinking mode, we're also in a shame mode, right? Well, I told everybody this is what I was going to do, and now I've got new information that says I really need to do something different or do it in a different way. And now I got to tell people. Or now, everybody's going to say, well, I thought you said, I thought you were going to do. Why didn't you? Right? But as they say, what other people think about you is none of your business. It's none of your business, including bosses, supervisors, all that kind of stuff. What they think about your work can have an impact on you. But what they think about you personally is none of your business. And so how do you not manipulate, that's the wrong word. How do you manage through, although sometimes we do manipulation. How do you manage through and navigate those relationships so that you can ensure that the focus, at least in your presence at all time, is on the work that you're doing and how you're showing up, not on your character. That's why I tell leaders all the time, when you are giving feedback, when you're talking to someone, you're coaching someone, you're giving them any kind of response to anything, focus on the behavior, right? What was the behavior? What was the impact of the behavior on the outcomes that were desired? That's the goal. You are not passing judgment on someone's worthiness. You're not passing judgment on somebody's character. You're not passing judgment on anything else. You are simply making an observation about observed behavior and factual impact on outcomes. That's what you're talking about. And that begins to help you take some of the emotion out of it and take some of the emotion out of it for the person that you're talking to. Because the minute you enter into some of those conversations with you did and you shoulda and why didn't you, that word you is a powerful word. And if you're overthinking before you even get into that room, or you're working with someone who's overthinking, they have already gone down the path of being prepared for you to be able to slay them in this situation. They're already down the path of how it's going to be bad and how you're going to take them out of their job and how it's already done. And they may or may not be able to short circuit that. So how are you as a leader helping them to short circuit that? By not getting in that boat with them. If you're on the receiving end of it, how do you short circuit that conversation, right? And say, so can we focus on what exactly was the action that was problematic and how was it problematic? So you being in control of your emotions so that you can redirect the person that's talking to you so you don't allow them to get into some kind of character assassination. It only takes one person to change a relationship. And you can do it in a way, because it's not unkind to be clear. You can do it in a way that prevents, right, some of the other stuff. And sometimes, because we speak the truth here, sometimes you have to meet shade with shade. Sometimes you just have to let people know, I see you. I see you. You think I don't understand what you're really saying or what you're really doing, but I see you. I see you. I see what you're doing. I see the potential impact. And because I see it, I know how I'm going to respond to it. And I know what risks I'm willing and not willing to take, including I'm just going to pause, or I'm going to remove myself from the situation for this minute until I can kind of regroup. And I've even said that in meetings. I'm going to need a minute. Let's pause right here, because I think this is going down a path that's not going to be beneficial to either one of us. And there are going to be some things said or done that are going to be absolutely irretrievable. So let's just pause and make a commitment to just regroup when we both had a time to breathe. I've done that. And you have the power and the choice to do that too. If you can't kind of get your emotions under control, extract yourself from the situation. I remember, I don't know if I've told you guys this before. I think I've said it on other things. I remember my very, very first job out of college. And I was an accountant. And there's a reason I'm not an accountant anymore. I'm an okay accountant. I'm not a great accountant. It just, the boredom just, I can't. Doing the same thing over and over again just makes me crazy. So I'm good, and it has given me some great foundation, but it's not my genius. And so I was in accounting in an oil and gas company, and I remember we were switching bosses because my boss was retiring. And so there was a new boss, and we were in the middle of the transition. And so my current boss was working with somebody else, and I had a question about something. We were at year end, and he didn't have time. So he said, go to this other person and ask him the question. And I remember going to him, catching him in the hall and saying, hey, I have a question about this. In the middle of the hall, everybody's there, right? Doors open. Now, this is big oil and gas, old time, right? So everybody had offices and all that. I don't know. Here's his words. I don't know if your boss doesn't have time for you. I don't know what makes you think I do. And turned around and walked away. I was mortified. I went to my office. I closed my door. I called my dad at work. Burst into tears. Oh my God, I can't. And at first he was really worried. He's like, oh my, what happened, right? And then I kind of got myself together, started explaining it to him. And then the line disconnected. And I was like, oh, wait, I lost it. So I called him back. I was like, Daddy, the line got disconnected. He's like, no, I hung up. I'm like, what? You hung up? He said, no, ma'am. He said, I need you to get it together. He said, you never lose your cool like that with folks. I need you to not be a stereotypical, notice he didn't say typical, stereotypical woman that gets hysterical and can't maintain her emotions. If you are that emotional, I need you to disconnect, remove yourself, go get it together, and then come back. And then you show him how to get it done. And I was like, well, all right then. And I hung up. I figured it out. And you know what? He came back about 30 minutes later. It's like, I'm sorry. If you still need some help, I got you. And I said, nope, it's okay. I got it. I figured it out. It's done. I had so much pride and strength in that moment because my emotions, I've gotten to be overthinking, right? I can't believe he did that. What do I don't know? I'm stupid. It was the death spiral, you guys. And then in that moment, my dad short-circuited it, right? He's like, he hung up. He's like, no, ma'am. I'm not listening to this. I'm not listening to this. And that hang up is what short-circuited my emotional meltdown, right? It got my attention. It made me pause. You're not always going to be able to call somebody who's going to hang up on you. That technical, right? Palpable short-circuiting. So how do you find a way to short-circuit the overthinking, to short-circuit the emotional meltdown? And we all have to keep living. You are going to have an emotional meltdown at some point. Keep living. But how do you put the tools in place so that you can recognize it, short-circuit it to the best of your ability, and regroup, especially in an organization? And this is not to say, so let me be really clear. This is not to say that you don't show vulnerability, that you don't show that you are human and that you have emotions. You have to do that too, because that's a way to build trust. People don't trust perfect people because they know there's a lot of mess behind the perfection, behind the facade, right? You want to have a level of humility and vulnerability so people know you're real, right? So people know that you're human and that they can relate. But there's a difference in being vulnerable and human and authentic and showing up with a level of transparency and having a complete meltdown where everybody sees the mess, right? Like I say, people don't need to see how the sausage is made. They just need to know their sausage. So keep the sausage making for your family, your really close friends, your therapist, right? That's where you make the sausage. That's where you do the deep work. And you need people to see you fix it in the moment. See you change in the moment. See you address it in the moment. There are a few things more powerful than seeing someone in a power position saying, we're going to take a minute. Seeing someone in a power position, instead of responding in kind, to really take the next step and say, I'm just gonna pause this right here. Think about your parents. Did you listen to them more when they were yelling and screaming, or when they got real quiet? When they leaned down, like in the grocery store, right? And you were acting a fool, and they leaned down and they got right in your ear and they said something that got your attention. The yelling and screaming and waving of hands and all that kind of stuff, right? We ignore the noise. But when somebody gets quiet and we have to physically strain to hear what they're saying, that gets our attention. So what is that pause that gets your attention? What is that pause that gets other people's attention when you need it? That thing that stops the overthinking. Because the overthinking also can be groupthink. When you guys are really going after something big and nobody's listening, everybody's trying to figure it out, and it gets messy. How do you pause that? How do you pause that, reset, and move forward? And sometimes the pause really needs to be a break. It really needs to be a break. And then you can get going again. Because sometimes just saying, oh, wait, hold on, is not enough. Sometimes it's like, hold on, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Because there was another situation that I was working with a client, and we were doing some heavy kind of risk management stuff. And it got really heated in the room. So the most senior level person was actually in the room with everybody else. So all of the subordinates were in there. And we were talking about risk. So we're talking about, really heavy things. And all of a sudden, he just got really upset with something that was saying. He started going after people, and that's not right, and this is not. And I could feel the room just start to sink. Everybody got quiet. People started saying something. People started being really quiet. Not saying anything, not responding. They were saying something in the beginning, and then they realized that the more they countered him, the louder he got, the uglier he got. So I paused. It's like, you know what, guys? Let's just take a 5-minute break. Took a 5-minute break. I pulled him aside. I said, you know what? Here's what's happening. Now, granted, I'm outside. I'm a consultant. Here's what's happening. We're not going to get to the outcome that we need with this. So I'm going to have to ask you to not come back after the break. Well, this is my meeting. You're paying me to get you the outcome that you want, which is transparency. Let's get at the real risk, all that kind of stuff. That's not happening. Did you see what was happening in the room? So I'm going to have to ask you to not come back. I will give you a full download, but your presence in the room means that the only view that is being expressed is yours, because everyone now is afraid to say anything else. And he didn't come back under duress. He was hot. But here's what happened in that moment. By short-circuiting that, taking the break, having the person who was being so disruptive not come back, right? What the people saw in the room was, one, someone was willing to see and could see that this was going nowhere fast, and that they were being kind of beat down, right? And their perspective was being negated. The other thing they saw was someone having the courage enough to say, yeah, no, we're going to do this differently. And I'm not going to be nasty. I'm not going to be ugly. I didn't call the person out in front of everybody, right? It was sideline, sidebar, all of that kind of stuff. And the amount of openness and willingness to then get back to it was incredible. So I give you that to say, if you can have the courage to short circuit, to be aware, and then short circuit the overthinking, especially in a group where the overthinking is causing consternation, right, and conflict, the power of the moments after that are immeasurable. But you've got to be able to recognize it first, and then be fearless in your willingness to address it, right? You'll hear Jacqueline say, it's not that you're not afraid. It's that you have the courage to just take the next step. That's what being fearless is. You still have fear. You're just willing to continue moving despite the fear, or through the fear, or around the fear, or whatever, right? As they say, the only way to get over something is to go through it. You can't necessarily short circuit the process, but you can short circuit the madness. You can short circuit the craziness if you are able and willing to recognize it, right? And then to do something about it. And it takes work, and it takes time. and a willingness to recognize when there's a challenge. But as overthinkers, have a hard time with that because the first thing we think is, oh, it's just me. Maybe I'm just overthinking. I shouldn't say anything. I just need to get it together. And all of that may be true. And it may be partially true, right? But overthinkers also need to pause and see what is the greater impact and how can we not only pause, but also do something different, redirect, right? Re-energize. Sometimes the pause is just, you know what? I'm going to pause this and we're going to come back to this next week. Or we're going to come back to this in a couple of hours or a couple of days or whatever. Sometimes the short circuiting needs time because it is so deep and so vast, right? And so heavy that you can't just do the trigger and keep moving. And it's okay if that's the case too. It's okay if that's the case too. Because overthinking, that art of overthinking, right, is going to get you to a place where you're completely paralyzed. Overthinking actually can impact negatively innovation because it negatively impacts speed, right? And it has fundamentally a piece of it that is founded, right, in fear and worry. We overthink because there's all this other stuff, all this risk management that we're trying to do. We overthink because we want to make sure we didn't miss something. We want to make sure we didn't cause another problem that we didn't think about. We want to plan for every potential outcome. You know what? There's going to be something we missed. You can't plan for everything. You can't plan for everything. And at some level, you have to have enough trust in yourself, faith in your team, right? Understanding of the folks that you have around you, that no matter what happens, you're going to be able to handle it. You have prepped enough and put in place enough early notification processes, right? You have enough tools in your toolbox to be able to respond to whatever it is. You know, that's a big thing for me. I have it on my computer and multiple times a day. Trust yourself. In this moment, you are enough. In this moment, you have enough. It's sitting right there, right? Because again, I'm the GOAT in overthinking. I got it on lock, right? About how to overthink. And so every once in a while, I have to just have that short circuit. And it's a big, bright orange Post-it, right? Actually, it's an index card that I have taped so that it catches my attention as my eyes move. What is the thing that can help you short circuit that spiral, short circuit that overthinking that's going to move you further away from that goal you say you have? Again, you want to plan, you want to be strategic, you want to think about risks because you want to manage your level of risk tolerance, right? You want to think about it. If you have the chance to do that, it's always good to at least consider the possibilities. You know, if you have to move quickly, right? Sometimes you have to move really quickly. Innovation is about moving fast, failing fast. But there are times that you can be slower and more precise. There's a spectrum, right? A whole spectrum moving from quick and approximate to slow and precise. There's a whole spectrum in there. You know, when you think about scientific research, that thing can take a very, very, very long time, over decades, to get to answers. Because science is not necessarily an exact science, right? What's going to happen? What if we change variables? That can take decades, right? It's very slow and precise because there are greater impacts to the ultimate outcomes, right? The ultimate answers that you get, there are greater impacts there. And then on the other hand, right, there's things that we can do that we can be really quick and approximate, right? I'm just going to go get a whole bunch of little paint samples. And I'm going to put paint samples on the wall, quick and approximate. Then I'm going to make a decision. It's just paint. It's just paint. You can change it. What have you got? You got a little sweat equity in there, but you can change the paint. Now, if you decide to knock down a wall, that might be a little bit harder to repair, but it's still not irreparable. So that overthinking, the part of the short circuit of overthinking is this something that can or cannot be undone once I do it? If it can be repaired, if I have the tools to be able to respond, if it doesn't go away, then keep it moving. Keep it moving. Short circuit the overthinking and keep it moving. If it's really something that's going to have a severe impact, if it doesn't go well, then you might want to slow down a little bit. You might want to still manage the overthinking so that you're overthinking in a positive direction around managing risks and being prepared, as opposed to just the overthinking, just the noise, right? Because you got to wade through the noise to get to the stuff that's important. But don't let the overthinking become a burden. Don't let the overthinking become a derailer. The thing that keeps you from getting to what you say you want. The thing that keeps you from recognizing and aligning with and accepting those things and those messages that you are being sent, that the universe is sending you. That's telling you where you should be going, right? And how you're going to be able to get there, and all of the stuff that you already have ready to be able to be successful, right? Because luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So when those opportunities come, don't overthink and just say no. Like I did the first time Jerry asked me to do this show. I was overthinking. I can't do that. That doesn't make sense. What am I going to talk about? I've never done this before. I mean, it was just, and I'm so good at it, it's automatic. I don't always recognize that I've gone through the entire process because, again, I'm carrying on 4 or 5 conversations at the same time. But I had to say it out loud to someone else for them to be able to say, what? No, ma'am, go make that phone call. And so that's part of that power of having a village around you when you're in that overthinking mode where somebody can short circuit it for you. If you don't have a trigger, right? If you can't find a trigger, find a person and let the person be your trigger. Find that confidant, find that mentor, find that sponsor, find that supporter that can help you short circuit the madness that's going on. Because that overthinking is an overburden. And it's unnecessary pain. There's already enough pain. So why add unnecessary drama to what you're doing? And overthinking is unnecessary. Think through things clearly. Make sure you're paying attention to what you're seeing and hearing and understand the risks and all that kind of stuff. Be smart, right? Be strategic. But don't be so caught up in the perfection that you miss the possibilities. Because that's what happens when we overthink. That's what happens when we overthink. And if we can pay attention to the messages that we're getting, you never know when that's exactly the message that you need to hear that's going to move you forward. Like the messages I heard this morning that led us to think about overthinking. Led me to talk about overthinking. And they all aligned. That's what's so amazing. When you are sitting in your zone, when you are moving in your purpose, when you are really clearly focused on hearing what you're supposed to hear, seeing what you're supposed to see, believing that you are prepared and you have enough, or working towards that, stuff aligns. It really does align. Overthink that, right? Go look at how those dots connect. And again, that's why I love what I do, because I can see those dots for someone else and be able to connect those. I can do them for myself now after a lot of years. Actually, it's always been a gift. I just didn't know it. But that ability to connect those dots for other people who are in that death spiral is awesome. Because to see them then step into that genius and to get out of that overwhelm and to get out of that craziness, that madness, and step into the thing that they say they wanted, because that's the whole point, right? We're working towards what you said you wanted. So how do we continue to do that without getting you in this death spiral? And if it's in the death spiral, how do we get you out of it? We got to recognize it first. And then how do we get you out of it? How do we build those triggers, those trigger points that say, whoa, death spiral. And then your actions that short circuit it. That's where your power lies. That's where your power lies. Because the thinking is good. The overthinking is bad.
Question from Facebook.
Yes.
Is cutting people a form of short circuit?
Yes. Especially cutting toxic people, really negative people, that is absolutely a form of short circuiting. If you're in one of those conversations right? And every time you say something, there is, well, I don't know why you said that, and that's not going to work, and that, cut that off. Cut that off. That's a way of short circuiting, because if you pay attention to how you're feeling and how you start thinking, if you start believing that, you got to short circuit it. Because the thing about having a conversation with anyone, even people that you love and trust and who got your back, everyone is coming at every situation from their own perspective and their own set of experiences. Those that really know you and love you and have your best interests also recognize that and probably say things like, you know what, now when this happened to me, this is what, but because that happened, here's what I think. If you're going to do this, here's the thing I think you need to watch out for. Those people may still have some concern and may express some negativity, but they express negativity with an option.
Yeah.
Other folks are just, no, you can't, you don't, you shouldn't. Why did you, are you crazy? Are you nuts? That's stupid. That's it. Cut that off. Cut that off. Now, if somebody's telling you, laying in the middle of the street right now to do this dare, that's stupid. Okay, you probably need to keep them because that really is stupid. But other stuff, cut it off. That is absolutely a short circuit. Absolutely a short circuit.
Pastor Deborah Brown Hollis said, yes, it's good to know when to have overthinking traits. We can take a step back and let the fruit of the Spirit, self-control, lead us to the truth.
Yes. Good morning. Yes, it is that overthinking. It's understanding and recognizing when it's happening so that then you can manage it. Because sometimes we just move without thinking at all. There are extremes. That moving without thinking at all, that can be just as dangerous as overthinking, where you're in paralysis. So recognize the overthinking. Understand if you're really analyzing, like deeply analyzing, because there's a lot of risk related to something. That is valid. When there's a lot of risk related to something, you probably want to take a little bit longer. But when you are thinking about it so much, days, hours, days, weeks, months, years, you might just be overthinking that thing. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Trust yourself. Trust yourself and find a way to respond to that. Find a way to respond to that. That moves you forward as opposed to keeping you stuck. Because then you'll look back years from now and say, I could have. Why didn't I? What stopped me? And even when you get in that death spiral, sometimes rejection is protection. Maybe it just wasn't your time. And every time you have a new day, you have a new opportunity. And if you're paying attention and if you're following what you're being told, right, the things that are showing up for you, maybe it's just going to show up a little bit later because now you're ready. You weren't ready before. Now you're ready.
We want to welcome a new listener, Dr. Alana L. Curry Cook, great woman I want you guys to meet.
Yay.
She says, sometimes I do overthink. I wouldn't think that she would, but sometimes I do overthink. So when you said there's a difference between overthinking, like if you've had a traumatic experience in one area, and then somebody comes back to you and says, oh, I can do this, I can do that, and you're like, no, because you remember that traumatic. Is that overthinking, or is that trying to process because you have history of it going bad?
Right. So there is a difference. So remember I said earlier that there are experiences that are factual, right? There are things that actually happen to us that tell us when I see this, this happens, right? That's our nervous system and our brain saying this means this. When this happens, this is going to happen. This is how it's going to impact me. That's real. That experience is real. What you've got to understand when you start thinking, oh, that was my experience, I'm not going to do that again. Is the story you're telling yourself about that experience real? Because that's what's now forming your overthinking and your action, right? So remembering it, connecting it to what you're having now is all good because that's learning. When it starts to be a problem is when you are not going back and evaluating, okay, well, you know what? That happened. It was 10 years ago. This is where this person was. This is where I was. I've actually seen how they've started moving different. So I have some caution because I had this direct experience with them, but I also know that they have some skill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some specific parameters including an earlier exit if necessary. And I'm going to manage to that. That's not overthinking. That is being smart about using your experiences to form your next action and being open to seeing new information that may change your action. Overthinking is, man, I really need this thing. This person asked me, but last time it didn't really work, but I really need this thing. Maybe I should just wait. Maybe somebody else will be able to do it. Maybe I can figure out, do I really need, that's overthinking. And you're 2 weeks, 2 years, 10 years down the road, still trying to figure out what you're going to do about that thing. That's overthinking.
Dr. Cynthia wants to know, is overthinking a bad thing? She said sometimes it can save you from harm and danger. What are your thoughts?
So remember, I'm thinking a difference between, or I'm talking a difference between the overthinking that gets you in that spiral of not moving to action at all versus thinking deeply and deliberately and sometimes a long time about something before you move. Overthinking keeps you from acting at all. Overthinking keeps you from acting at all. Deep thinking, which could be long-term, right? That moves you to action. That's all good. My friend in California, he is the king of deep thinking. So for example, when he goes into a role, he's like, you know what? I only evaluate this every 2 years. I'm in this role for 2 years. I'm in it. What that means is he's never second guessing. Should I have, is it time to move? I look for something. What is, then at 2 years, he's like, okay, now I'm going to make a decision. Now I'm going to think deeply about, do I still want to be here? Is this the thing for me? What does it make sense? So he doesn't allow himself to get into that turmoil of overthinking, right? I shouldn't have been here. I shouldn't have, no, I made this decision. Here's why I am. Here's where I'm going to sit. And then I get to think about it again in 2 years. He also says, you know what? I'm taking this because I need some time to think. And he can think about something for extended periods of time. And I mean years. But what he doesn't do is let that thinking get into his gut, right? His nervous system, cause stress. Overthinking causes stress and paralysis. Deep thinking causes pause, right? Like you said, it's protection. Something doesn't feel right. If you're thinking deep, you're really paying attention to your gut. You're really paying attention to those little voices that say, oh, maybe not right now. Overthinking, you're not hearing any of that. All you're hearing is your own voice and your own stories. That's what I mean by overthinking. Does that make sense?
Yes. Dr. Alana said evaluation of facts is not overthinking. When that thought is, because I was telling somebody the other day, they said, I want to do this for you, I want to do this. And I said, I'm very uncomfortable with somebody who wants to do everything for me, because somewhere along the line, the ball will be dropped, and I can't afford the ball to be dropped. And I didn't think that was being paranoid. I think that was an evaluation of some facts, and actually the ball was dropped. But I had a next, and I said that on Facebook. I always have a next in your spirit, because I do think, okay, I got so-and-so, but if this doesn't work out, I can easily get somebody else in this part, because I've already felt kind of,
Exactly.
Is that okay?
Yes, because as she said, evaluation of facts is not overthinking. Overthinking is where we get into those stories around the facts that may or may not be true. Again, overthinking leads to paralysis. Deep thinking leads to an evaluation of your gut, what's true, what's not true. Deep thinking is when you're in that kind of ventral, right? You're on your game. Overthinking, you're not on your game. You're just kind of out there. And to your point, Jerry, that's about abdication versus delegation.
Oh, good, you did that.
Don't abdicate, delegate. I tell leaders that all the time. That whole, okay, you got it. That's abdication. Delegation is, okay, here's what I need you to do. We're all good. I'm trusting you. Let's just set some check-ins.
Yeah.
That's delegation. Delegation also includes setting expectations, having the right training, making sure people have the right tools, having your backup plan, right? There's a strategy around delegation. Abdication is, you know what, I didn't want to do this in the first place. This is something I hate to do. I'm just going to give it to you. And I walk away. When you abdicate, you are setting yourself up to have to deal with whatever happens, good and bad, because you have ceded all responsibility to someone else. So I tell leaders all the time, delegate, don't abdicate.
That's good. Dr. Alana talked about it also leads to IBS. Could that? Some people really full of it, but I can imagine that would.
Over
Overthinking.
stress, yes, overthinking can lead to a lot of mental, emotional, and physical responses that are unpleasant. Yes.
That's another good reason to stop.
It's the Rutledge perspective. We talk about everything.
Abdicate, yes, she's repeating you that. Abdicate and don't delegate. Oh no, abdicate and delegate, right?
Yeah, you want to delegate, not abdicate.
And
delegation is good. Delegation is, I am delegating this to you. I'm going to continue to support you. I'm going to give you the right training, the right tools, set the right expectations. Abdication is, I'm no longer responsible. It's all you. It's all you. We often abdicate responsibility for the stuff we don't like to do. Right? So especially if you have your own business or if you're a leader, if you hate doing your monthly budget, right? You hate doing invoices. You hate checking people's expense reports. You hate doing all that kind of stuff. And you're like, okay, my assistant, you just take care of that. Just tell me where to sign. Really? Is that what you really want? Because if you are abdicating that responsibility, that means whatever happens, you've abdicated the work to someone else, but you have not necessarily given up your responsibility and ultimately accountability for it. If it's your business, it's still your business.
There you go.
It's
if
still
it
your
goes
business.
wrong, the leader is the one that's responsible. So it's not micromanaging, correct?
Nope.
Okay, good.
Responsibility rolls down, accountability rolls up. You are still accountable for those people who are using their expense reports and their credit cards, right? Their corporate cards. You are still accountable for how people show up representing you in your business. You're accountable for all of that. Just because you abdicated and just gave it to somebody and didn't want to have to deal with it anymore doesn't mean you are no longer accountable for it. You're still accountable. That's why you delegate, don't abdicate. I'm going to ask you to start doing these expense reports for me on a monthly basis, right? So what that means is if you will go through, double check them, make sure everything's okay, point out any kind of issues. If there's something that's not there, you do all of that stuff where we have to do back and forth. When they come to me, I'm expecting that these are the final ones that want to be reported. So then I can do a quick review. I can do a cursory audit on my own before I sign anything. That's delegation. Delegation is, man, I hate setting up these books. So I'm going to have you set them up. And then we're going to go through everything that was set up and how the things are automatically done. So we're going to set up some automation. So I'm not in it and you're not in it. It's automatic. And then I can audit it, right? I'm going to set up a separate email that's your email that's still on my account, but I have access to it. So I can go check it and audit it whenever I want to.
Let me ask this question. She said the pandemic has made us overthink sometimes about moving around. Is that overthinking?
That's a good question. You know, I think it can be, right? It's overthinking related to fear and caution. You know, last week we talked about caution versus fear. If you're just being cautious because folks are not being careful, I don't necessarily think that's overthinking. But if you're getting to the point where you're like, oh, you know, I'm not going to travel. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to go to this event. I'm still not ready to go out to eat. I'm still, you know, only you can figure out if that's your fear talking or if that's your gut saying, I've been asked to go to dinner, but I know these people and I know how they move. And I know they're not careful and they're not vaccinated, or I'm immunocompromised and I know who that is not overthinking. That is actually, as Dr. Lana said, that's taking actual facts and making a decision. If what you're saying is, I just can't leave my house right now because, you know, if I leave my house, then that gets into overthinking and can lead to some paranoia and things. So it's a balance. It's a balance.
Dr. Lana talking about she delegates washing dishes. That's something you might want to advocate.
Right. Right. Well, but if you abdicate it, you said, I just need you to wash dishes.
Yeah.
You need to know what somebody else's definition of wash is.
I know.
Because somebody else's definition of wash may be just dunking it in some really hot water, kind of scraping it a little bit and putting it back in the rack. That's not clean to me.
No, my mama delegated with a belt because I would put them up greasy. So that's probably what she said. She got
right. So just really this week, you guys, I really want you, when you get in kind of this place where you're starting to feel that kind of that frenetic energy, right? You can't seem to move. give yourself the gift of pausing and understanding, am I overthinking, or is there really something in my gut that's saying you need to wait a minute? And here's the thing, you know the difference. You know the difference. We just don't often give ourselves a chance to figure out which one it is, because we are trying to move so fast. Sometimes you got to go slow to go fast. Sometimes you got to go slow to go fast. And remember, delegate, don't abdicate. All right. Thank you to all the new listeners. That was just awesome. I love spending this time with you. Excited for next week, 100th episode of the Rutledge Perspective. And it is voting day in the U.S., November 2nd. I love the fact that my show is on Tuesdays. And Tuesdays is always voting day, election day. I love it. So make sure you're registered, check your voting registration, show up at your polls, know what your poll is, be prepared, because there is some madness going on, especially here in Texas. Make sure you're ready. Go vote. Go get educated so you can go vote. Join me here again next week. I'll be putting this stuff up on YouTube as well, so you can listen to replays. Thank you for spending the time. Thank you to all my international listeners. I really appreciate it. I just appreciate y'all.
They all said a very good show, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your comments. And I will be back next week. Follow the podcast, the Rutledge Perspective Podcast, on all of the platforms. Download, share it, tell people. Trying to get to 17,000 downloads by the end of the year. Need your help. Bye, guys. See you next week.